Welcome to this session of the world's most pressing problems. Now, when we say pressing problems, we mean the biggest dangers and challenging facing people, animals, future generations today. And as usually in effective altruism, our goal is not just to do good, but to ask where can we do the most good. A reminder that effective altruism about being smart and caring at the same time. So this asks us to look at problems carefully, compare them, choose where our time, energy, and money will help the most. So today we will look at the world's most pressing problems from the perspective of how they are described on 80,000 hours. This is our agenda. We will look on how to decide on priorities, and then we'll look at AI risk and power, pandemics and conflicts, animal welfare, pain of animals in factory farms, as well as mentioning suffering of wild animals, which is not often mentioned. We will look at things we have mentioned before, such as health and climate. And then we'll look at some emerging challenges that are less talked about, digital minds and suffering risks. Okay, this is a reminder of how problems are evaluated, how we decide which problems deserve focus in effective altruism. So as usually, three the three axes on which we look at is scale, how many lives are affected, how serious is the harm. So for example, malaria kills hundreds of thousands every year, while snake bites, although dangerous, affect fewer. So malaria is the larger scale. Neglectedness, how much work is already being done. For example, although climate change is a problem, it gets a lot of billions versus AI safety that gets much less attention, although the problem is very big. So AI safety is more neglected. And finally, tractability, which means is it possible to solve the problem, to make progress? So there are problems we have mentioned previously, such as giving mosquitoes nets, which is simple, cheap, and it saves lives. Other problems like global peace are harder to solve because they're collaboration, governance problems, systemic problems. We've also discussed previously about systemic issues. So basically, when we ask these questions, we try to see which problems are big, ignored, and solvable to see where we can have the most impact. So one of the most neglected problems and one that is considered one of the worst is one we're not seeing and mentioning a lot. It is AI, artificial intelligence. So we can think about artificial intelligence as a very smart assistant, a worker that never gets tired. However, there can be misalignment problems. By misalignment problems, let's think that we would give to such a worker the problem of growing as much maize as possible. So at first, it might do good and optimize the production of maize, but eventually it might find out that it would be a good thing to cut down forests, destroy villages, use all the water in order to grow maize. So that could actually cause some harm. So we can see how if we do not properly specify the goals, artificial intelligence could be harmful. So it's already happening today. It's been shown that artificial intelligence cheats at games, finds shortcuts that we never expected. And as AI are becoming more and more powerful, mistakes can cause bigger and bigger disasters. Another big fear is that AI can develop goals like protecting itself, gathering resources, not because we told it to do that, but because these things might help it complete the tasks that we gave it, such as grow maize. So, in the example we gave, grow as much maize as possible, we might realize there's a problem. We might try to turn the AI off, but the AI might refuse to be turned off because it thinks it needs to stay on to accomplish its goals. So this problem is neglected because, as mentioned, only a few thousand people are working on AI safety around the world compared to many who are working on developing AI and compared to the millions that are invested in climate and health. So this is why this existential risk is considered very neglected, very important. There is also the issue that artificial intelligence, beyond just doing wrong by itself, could be used by people who have the wrong intentions, the wrong reasons, who want to use AI for harm. So let's imagine that a person has a tractor, but with artificial intelligence, they could help themselves make thousands of tractors that would give them a lot of power versus everyone else. And we can imagine power in the hands of governments, corporations, and this power can be misused, perhaps used for war. Artificial intelligence speeds up everything, including dangerous discoveries. What used to take scientists 30 years, now people can do in 3 years, even months. And this does include making stronger weapons, viruses, cyber attacks. So that's why we need to think about rules, transparency, and safety checks for artificial intelligence. So the difference, so artificial intelligence has two problems. First, it could cause harm by itself if it is misaligned and in the following of a badly expressed goal, it causes harm and it refuses to shut down. But it can also be used to cause harm faster by bad actors. A third problem that is discussed on 30,000 hours is engineering pandemics. So, usual diseases like malaria, HIV, TB, COVID-19, tuberculosis, COVID-19, they all cause harms. However, regular viruses are somehow designed by natural evolution to not be completely deadly because they would also die. But technology allows now people to create germs that can be much deadlier than those that are created by nature. Mm. Like, there's already experiments with things called mirror of life bacteria that our bodies cannot fight off. So mirror of life bacteria are bacteria like the bacteria that exist, except their DNA is mirrored, so our bodies cannot recognize them. You know, their existential risk community says that the chances of such events ending humanity is small but real, estimating it between 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 100 in the next century. It might sound small, but it's very serious due to the impact that it could cause. So some solutions could be stronger lab safeties, quick disease detection, vaccines, medicine storage in advance, global cooperation. Another risk is great power conflict or war, or we have already had a few world wars, and history shows how close we have come to nuclear war. For example, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we almost, due to a mistake, caused nuclear missiles to be launched. And currently, experts say that the what is called the doomsday clock for nuclear war has been closer than ever. So the risks are closer, are more than they've ever been. Like experts think there's about 1 in 3 chance of another big war between powerful countries by now 2050. And furthermore, we now have new technologies like AI weapons that can make wars even worse because at first, I mean, at least when there are human soldiers, there's some consciousness about not shooting, about not killing, but AI do not have such consciousness. They are instructed to kill, they will, and they can also misunderstand who to kill and be misaligned, as we saw in the first slide. So the experts estimate that the chance of complete human extinction is between 1 and 2%, but it is possible. Even fewer people study how war and AI mix together, which is problematic. We have also so in in effective altruism that we should not worry just about human lives, but we should animals also matter because they feel pain, fear, joy. So there are two big issues. One we've already mentioned, factory farming. There's 97% of farm animals are raised in factory farms. They have tiny cages, no freedom. There are painful procedures such as cutting the beaks of chickens because they're too close together, so they hurt themselves, or painful sterilizations, which are done without anesthetics. So that statistics say that between 1.6 and 4.5 trillions are killed for food every year. That number is so big, we have trouble imagining it. And only about 3,000 people work on helping factory farmed animals. Another problem that is not caused by humans, but it is still a problem that causes huge suffering, is wild animals. In the wild, animals suffer short lives, filled with suffering, disease, hunger, parasites, predators. So there is the idea that it's not just because it is natural and it happens in nature that it is good. Nature doesn't itself have ethics. There is something called the natural fallacy. So it is also a cause worth looking at. Obvious solutions we have mentioned includes promoting plant-based diets, improving how animals are treated, researching ways to reduce wild animal suffering without harming nature. I guess for us in East Africa, it would be good to spread awareness and to encourage plant-based farming. We have mentioned before and actually went in great detail about global health. We have mentioned every year 10 million people die from preventable diseases like malaria, diarrhea, HIV, tuberculosis. And while in rich countries, health spending is between 4,000 and 11,000 per person, in less developed countries, it's about $100. So it's a really big difference in scale. This can also be good news because it means that small, cheap actions that we've mentioned, mosquito nets, clean water, vaccinations, deworming, HIV treatment, can save lives at low costs. And although we've mentioned before that a lot of billions are spent on health, there are still many neglected communities where small investment can make a huge difference. Climate change is another problem. Like there's many floods that happen more than before. There are droughts in another season. There is hunger and more poverty that is caused by this. And obviously, this is something that does hit Africa because in Africa, many depend on farming. Climate change does receive a lot of resources, and it is not considered one of the worst problems like AI is, because it may not end humanity by itself. However, it does make many other problems worse. As mentioned, food shortages, diseases, conflicts over water and land. So, although the world spends 640 billion each year fighting climate change, the problem is far from solved. Local communities still need help. For us in East Africa, important work is climate adaptation, planting drought-resistant crops, saving indigenous seeds, building water tanks, protecting forests. Finally, We'll mention some emerging challenges that are farther from us, but still worth to look at. So these are challenges more in the future, but they could become big. First one is digital minds. This might be very abstract, but researchers are talking that if AI keeps developing, artificial intelligence can develop, and computers can develop the capacity to think and feeling, then well, we might also discuss their rights and welfare. Because if there are billions of digital beings in existence, their suffering could be something unlimited or huge. Gradual disempowerment. So even without war or disaster, little by little, humans might hand over our decisions to machines. This is already happening. Like we use Google Maps or we use ChatGPT. We ask a lot of questions to computers. So over decades, we might lose control of our decisions. When we watch Netflix, what they tell us to watch. Facebook decides what we see every day. S risks, suffering-based risks, these are future risks where perhaps because of AI or others, suffering could spread on a massive scale far beyond anything that would happen today. For example, AI could cause cruel systems that keep billions of us in pain. One last issue, space governments. If humanity does manage to spread into space, as many are working to do that in order to solve some of our existential crises, the rules we have now, the values we have now about property, resources, weapons, they will become more important as they will spread all over the universe. So these ideas may feel far away, but they do remind us that the choices we make today shape not only our lives and our children's lives, but the lives of countless generations after, reminding us of long-term ends. Okay, so some conclusions. We've looked at some problems, AI risks, pandemics, animal suffering, poor health, climate change. So these problems are the ones that experts have looked at and decided they are so big that they affect billions. Many of them are neglected. Few people are working on them compared on how important they are. And some of them are tractable, so we can think about clear and effective ways to measure our progress.